Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Hello, my loves. Welcome to the show. So many women are hiding their power for fear of being seen as either too much or not enough, feeling shame, mistrust, and fear of their capacity to manifest magical lives. So, I've created a free, juicy, live Manifesting with the Moon open circle gathering for our sisterhood of secret witches, aka powerful women in hiding, for new moon each month. Manifesting with the Moon is where you can get up close and intimate with me as I share my wild alchemy wisdom whilst holding you as you take your tender first steps into the path of liberating your wild witch and manifesting the magical life your unique soul longs for. Come and sit by the virtual fire with us. Spaces are limited, so book your tickets at www.nicolebarton.co.uk/moon-circle. Today's guest is Salena Walker. Selena lives off-grid in the woods and she's got an amazing story. She loves growing organic herbs, flowers, fruit and vegetables and focusing on creating a healthy body, healthy mind and healthy planet. Her mission in life is to connect others to their internal and external environment, focusing on what they drink, eat, breathe, think and even excrete. Her real deep dive into the world of naturopathy and nutrition began back in 2008 when she was diagnosed with the autoimmune disease Pernicious Anaemia. She started her studies with the intention of learning and she healed her autoimmune disease and ended up being a practitioner, a naturopathic teacher, writer and a motivational wellness speaker. She was a wonderful guest, so I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's dive in. Selena, I am thrilled to welcome you onto the show. I've known you for some time now. We met at the Hay House Writers Workshop many years ago, and I knew from there that you had such an inspiring journey, really, for so many people, with just how you live your life, really. So, yeah, and you're also my wonderful naturopath. So I know frequently you say something in session, it's like, wow, what? I didn't even see that. So you illuminate so much amazing stuff for me. And I remember you saying what the body creates, it can uncreate, right at the start of our journey. And that kind of blew my mind. So I'm really looking forward to what gems are going to come out of this one for all the secret witches at home. So yeah, welcome to the show. I'm very excited.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share with all the secret witches out there.
Yeah, I know. I'm very, very excited to have you here. And today we're here to talk about how we can connect to the wild to discover our truth. So, yeah, I guess a good place to start, I think, given your story, because it's amazing, would be, to invite you to share a little bit about your journey with the wild and how that's helped you step into your truth and your power. So I don't know if you want to start there.
Yeah, I'll start there. It's a bit of a traveling journey of a story as it involves lots of different roots. It's a bit like the roots of the tree. I will start with in my late 20s. So I'm in my early 40s now. So we're talking about quite some time ago, and that time gets further and further away. But in my late 20s, I had my so-called dream job, the job I had been working on my career for. And I was feeling pretty rubbish. I was feeling quite rubbish mentally and physically. And I didn't know why. I'd been working towards this job, I had it, and I had the so-called dream life. But there was something niggling in me that was telling me it was wrong. And in that moment, it was coming out in a physical way. And after many years of going back and forth the doctors and being told that maybe I need some antidepressants, being told that I was lazy, being told it was all in my head, I knew deep down in my intuition there was something wrong. And after going through many, many years with the doctors, I came to the conclusion that I had an autoimmune disease called Pernicious Anaemia. And that is from where your body stops absorbing vitamin B12 through the digestive canal. So it can't absorb it digestively. And even though I was vegan, it was nothing to do with me being vegan. It was because my immune system had suddenly decided that it wasn't going to work that well with me. And my immune system, I always say, became a bit of a drama queen. And the reason I tend to say that is because it was a result of what was going on in my life. Deep down, I wasn't happy. Deep down, even though I had this so-called dream life, my intuition was telling me something was wrong. And I knew that because even though I was getting prescribed all the medication that I was needed, I was having the vitamin B12 injections even more regular than I needed because my body wasn't reacting well, I was still not feeling good. And suddenly this one day, it just rised up in me. Maybe it's nothing to do with the medication. Maybe it's not just about the physical problems. What if it's my whole life? And it was like, bang. It was like one of those magical moments where it was as scary as exciting, because it was suddenly, I knew I had to change everything. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't go back. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah, it was a bit of a moment.
Yeah, I'm kind of like that's kind of a big revelation in its own, really. So,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm curious, just as I'm just going to dive in there.
yeah.
How aware were you of your body at this point? Were you quite familiar with it, or would you say you kind of numbed it out a little bit?
I would say I was quite numbed out for it. I had that attitude of my body's not working and it's not doing what it should do and it's going wrong. So by calling it, I was almost detached from it. It was something that I didn't have a connection with and it was going wrong. So
Yeah, that was my sense, because I think that's been part of my journey as well. And I think actually we were exploring listening to the body in my Facebook group this month. But yeah, it just struck me as something the secret, which often does, is she's quite disconnected from her body. So I just thought that'd be interesting to see whether that was your experience too.
yeah, and interesting within that, even through the disconnection, that one day the intuition couldn't, that intuition, that inner wisdom inside of you was whispering, but that day she screamed. I listened. So it's interesting that even though when you can feel quite shut down, that intuition is still there, and one day the fireworks will happen and
Yeah,
you can't help but scream.
I love that. And I'm curious what kind of shifted in you to be able to see it finally, I guess, as well.
Yes. If anything, what had shifted was recognizing that I was on the medication. I had changed my diet to some degree. I'd looked at the food. I was taking supplements, and I was doing all the things that were giving me the gold stars, so to say. But I was still not feeling great. So I was starting to explore what else could it be.
Yeah,
That's the
gorgeous.
thing.
Yeah, love that. So what happened next?
Me and my partner decided to throw everything up in the air, and we bought 10 acres of land in beautiful Wild West Wales, not knowing really what to do, but we just knew we needed to do something different. And it was kind of make and break on all levels, on health levels, on physical levels, even on our relationship level, really, because we knew we were going through massive changes. So we moved to West Wales. I handed in my notice to my dream job, with
Wow.
no job lined up in West Wales, not very much in the bank account, but a lot of trust. That intuition was starting to, the embers of that intuition that had roared up on fire that one day, the fire was starting to really stay alight, and the flames were starting to roar loud inside of me. So we moved down to West Wales with, as I said, a lot of trust. And we decided that we wanted to really connect with our land and just change our lives on every level, change our lives. So the water that we were drinking was coming from the land, that the electricity that we were producing was coming from the land, that the food that we were producing was coming from the land, that our internal nourishment was coming from the land. And we wanted to weave in every aspect back to the wild as much as possible. So while we were going through the journey of getting planning permission, we moved in with friends who lived just a couple of miles down the road. There's the Lammas Eco Village, and we had friends there that we lived with for 2 years while we were part of that process, going through planning to try and build our own little cabin in our woods. And that was an amazing journey in itself, living on an eco community. living with friends, and starting to put in our roots into the whole community in the area, because it was just 2 miles down the road. So that meant by the time we moved to our land, by the time we got planning permission and moved to our land, our roots were going deep into the soil in this area, because we had this spiritual community around us to support us along that way. And of course, while I was going through the process of getting planning and moving into the eco village and then moving onto the land, I was on my own personal healing journey, trying to heal my autoimmune disease. And part of that journey was I ended up training with the Nutritional Healing Foundation to be a naturopath. I'd done training in herbalism and I'd done other little training courses, but I'd never fully gone into naturopathy. So I trained as a naturopath. And I suddenly thought, how can I help others if I can't help myself? So I was the first kind of guinea pig, so to say, my first case study. And I put everything into practice, everything. I looked at what I eat, what I drink, what I think, what I excrete, how I connect with the world, looked at my external world, how it was impacting my internal world, and turned it around. And the interesting thing was, I was suddenly feeling great, but still deep inside of me, I had that thought of, maybe my body's not good enough. Maybe I'm not well. Maybe I'm fooling myself. And it's interesting how that came up. So I then decided that I need to let go of this illness, because it was taking control of me and I'd become the illness. It was what I would talk about with people. So I suddenly started to look at, what do I enjoy about this so-called dis-ease in my body?
Yeah.
What has become part of my identity that I need to let go of?
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I had chronic fatigue syndrome. And one of the questions that I asked myself was like, how does it benefit me to have created this, if that makes sense? And that almost sounds a little bit like, yeah, it's not something that I guess most people would think about that way. But it's, I think this, the moment we start to take ownership of how we are creating life, it gives us our power back in a way as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. 100% agree, because I was suddenly realizing that actually through this illness I'm getting a bit of attention. You know,
Yeah.
I'm getting a bit of attention through the way I'm having to inject a couple of times a day. People are checking in with me, am I okay? So is part of this illness just me reaching out for love from others? And is part of that because I don't love myself and I don't
Yeah.
have trust in myself? So it was having to go through that journey and letting go of all that and realizing that was all part of it.
Yeah, I love that. It was exactly the same for me. And even with my face, because when I was pregnant, one of the things that you were helping me with was the Bell's palsy. And I was like, how am I benefiting from this? Oh, because I get loads of love and attention.
Yeah.
It's like it
Yeah.
actually does serve me. And letting go of that is quite a challenge.
It's massive, because we tend to look at illness as a physical thing, as our body going wrong, but we have to remember that we are physical, emotion and spiritual beings, so it is affecting us on all those levels. And the one thing that really helped me was realizing that, but then I created a little ceremony on our land. I have a moon tree on our land, which is the tree that I connect with. And she's a beautiful willow tree that's also wrapped with holly and alder, which brings in a beautiful balance in the masculine and feminine energy. The moon tree was where I created a ceremony to totally let go of the dis-ease that I had. And it was a beautiful moment of me being on the land, giving back to the earth, the parts of the medication that I was having to take, the paraphernalia that involved with that. I wrapped it in a bundle with words that I wanted to let go of that was associated with my illness. I then went to the stream and gathered a big chunk of quartz and turned that bit of quartz over, and there was a heart-shaped emblem just carved out of this bit of quartz, which to me was just a sign
Wow.
that it was now was the time.
Yeah, you went from like drama queen to ritual queen and
Yeah,
that.
and I just let it go. And the interesting thing was, once I let it go, I could just feel, I felt a totally different person. I felt reborn. It was almost like talking about the secret witch. It was like, up until that point I had been a secret witch, but then the fire had burnt and I'd kind of stepped through the fire and I was able to be the person that I needed to be. But interestingly enough, I still wouldn't share it with other people. I didn't tell anybody that I'd stopped injecting, because part of my illness was I was having to inject once or twice a day vitamin B12 just to stay alive. Normally you have to do it every 3 months, but I had another complication inside of me, and my body just needed a lot of it to stay alive. So I just suddenly stopped. I thought that I need to know that I'm okay. So I stopped, but I didn't tell anyone. And part of that was I didn't want anyone to put doubt into my mind, because I knew there was doubt in my mind anyway. So I didn't tell anyone for 3 months until I was going to see the doctor to find out about how my bloods were. So I went to see the hematologist, the blood specialist, and all my bloods were not only as good as last time, but they were even better than the time before. So there was no point in me stopping taking the medication. And he wanted to see me one last time, and the beautiful synchronicity that happened there, when I got sent my final appointment with a hematologist, it was on the winter solstice. That point of the year always represents the end of the darkness. So it was just that beautiful synchronicity from the universe that my last appointment with a hematologist was on the winter solstice, the end of the darkness. And it was the end of the darkness. I came through that and was just able to live again, but also live who I wanted to be in connection with the land, live wild.
Wow, I've got goosebumps at that. That's amazing. I love that about winter solstice. I just think that's such a magical story. So thank you for that. Wow, what a start. One of the things that strikes me about that is often when people kind of connected the idea of being a witch, they can often kind of be playing around with these witchy things like I don't know, like manifesting or whatever rituals or whatever they're doing. But actually, there's very much like an intentionality to your journey, and I wondered if we could explore that, because I think it almost can seem like it's a bit of a nice to have, whereas actually it's almost, well, it is essential really to life creation. So I wonder if you can speak a little bit to kind of being intentional before we then dive properly into the wild, because I think yeah, that would be the next place to go.
I think being intentional is so important. You can go to ceremonies, and there's some beautiful ceremonies that happen worldwide, and it's great that we are all connecting back with ceremony. But I would always say that there needs to be an intention before going into ceremony. There needs to be an intention before you take anything, be that a spiritual practice or a physical practice. For instance, one of my loves is cacao. I love raw cacao. And well, not every single morning, but most mornings I do have a mug of cacao. And I always try to do that with intention, thinking about what am I trying to take from the medicine of this cacao today. It's heart medicine cacao is. So if I am drinking it unconscious, I am unconsciously putting that heart medicine inside of me. And it's just being conscious and having that intention with everything, because nature has intention. Throughout the year, nature has intention about what she is going to do. She has intention that in the winter the leaves will drop from the trees to allow the sap to go into the roots, so the roots can rest and nourish throughout the winter. And then she has intentions that sap will rise in springtime to bring the leaves out, and so all of the other beings can benefit from that tree, and that tree can connect with all the other trees in the woodlands, and the humans can connect with the tree as well. So in nature there's intention. And I think sometimes as human beings we've become a bit unconscious about things that we do. And I think that intention is very important to put into not just organized events such as ceremony, but just everyday events such as having a cup of tea.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah. No, you're just making me think of cacao now, actually. Really craving it. So I'm gonna have that after this. That's and make it intentional as well. So coming back to the wild, which is what we're here to talk about, because your journey was really just a physical rewilding as well. You literally physically just went and lived in the wild, which is not your average everyday experience, I don't think. So I guess what is the importance of the wild would be a good place to start for maybe secret witches who don't necessarily go into the wild, which I'm assuming they probably do to some level, but like how important is it?
I think the wild is us. It's essential. The wild is who we are. We are animals I think we forget as human beings, we see ourselves separate to wild, separate from nature, and separate from animals in the animal kingdom. But human beings are just an animal, like my cat walking through the garden with me. There's no difference between me having my bare foot on the earth as my cat next to me having his bare feet on the earth, because we are both just animals walking through nature. And I think
Wow.
as civilization has developed, we've become further away. We drink water that's not natural. We eat food that's not natural. We take medicine that's not natural. We have thoughts that are unnatural, which results in us excreting things from our body that are unnatural. And I think, to me, everything comes back down to, we need to get back to nature. We need to get back to the wild, because that's what our bodies are created for. Our bodies hum with delight when we were in the wild. I'm sure we've all experienced that. We've experienced maybe being really stressed and suddenly gone for a little walk just to the local park even, or a little bit of greenery, or just put your feet outside in your garden, and suddenly you get that moment where you know everything's okay, because you've reconnected with your external wild, which allows you to connect with your internal wild.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I can say more about that. So I always say healing is about bringing connection between your external environment to your internal environment. You might have heard the sayings macrocosm to microcosm. Whatever's going on in the microcosm, which is your internal environment, is what's going to go on in our macrocosm, which is our external environment. So if we are out in nature and we are walking barefoot on the earth, and we are absorbing the delicious ions that are in the earth that balance our internal electrical flow, internally that's going to have an impact on us. So for instance, where I live here, as I said, I live in the woodland. I live in a small cabin in the woods. I walk out the door and I'm in nature. So that means that my external environment is very natural. So my internal environment wants to be natural. I generally eat a very natural plant-based diet, and I'm drinking water from the spring and the wells in our land. And I notice when I go away from that, say if I'm having to go into a city to teach, if I have a moment where I'm not able to access the food that I would say is more natural and more as nature intended, I notice my system getting upset very easily. But I used to live like that, never noticed it. But it's
Yeah.
because I feel I'm more in tune with the wild. Does that make sense, Nicole?
Yeah, it does. I love that. And I've never quite heard it described like that. And it just really spoke to me. And when you said we're animals as well, I was like, wow, yeah, that makes total sense. Like we are. So why are we living like this rather than out in nature? Yeah. Um, so I guess if people want to begin to kind of reconnect with their wild witch, which is the kind of term that I use for their liberated witch. How can the wild really help us to rediscover ourselves and our power?
The wild can help in so many ways. I mean, when you go out in nature, the wild is just there waiting. It's like a natural prescription. You've got the plants around us, you've got the animal kingdom around us, and they're all just there waiting for us to slot back in and work in harmony. And I would say a great thing to do is just get out in nature, somewhere you feel safe. To start with, that might mean going for a walk with somebody else until you feel safe in that environment, but go in somewhere where you can fully look at the environment and fully get to know that environment through all the seasons, because nature throws so many different things at us at springtime, at summer, at autumn, at winter. And I am blessed here because I get to see our woodlands throughout those 4 seasons, and just knowing that whatever you need, nature will provide. So for instance, when we first came here, I was getting some stomach upsets, and outside one day I was walking around and trying to do it consciously, because so many things we switch off to when we just stomping around because we need to make time for this walk. But when we're actually conscious about it, suddenly I saw plants arising that could actually help with my anxiety and help with stomach complaints. So the plants
Wow.
are all there that we need. And you will notice that as things arise in your body, the plants just pop up. The plants are there to help us. And the more that
Yeah.
we connect with nature, the more that we'll notice that as well.
Yeah, I love that. I always think of when I've heard that before, I've always thought about like how there's stinging nettles and the dock leaves grow right next to them, and it's like, oh, our medicine's right there. It's just, yeah, no, it's interesting actually. Lily did grab a stinging nettle the other day when she was out in the wild. She was like, oh, look at this, and I just grabbed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, I did give her some homeopathic urtica, which was for like stinging nettle rashes, and that took it away. So that is very much how I live my life in terms of yeah, medicine from the plants.
Just talking about stingy nettle there, stingy nettle, she's such an interesting one. She's known as the warrior energy, because if you go up to stingy nettle and you're a bit cautious and you touch her, she'll bite back. The warrior will come out. But if you go up and meet her warrior energy with your warrior energy and grab her with assertion, she won't sting. So she teaches you to be a warrior by the way you just need to grab her to obtain her medicine. And I love that about her. I absolutely love
Wow, that's very cool. I'm very intrigued about that. So Lily's definitely a warrior. She's wild.
it.
So my next question actually you just touched on was about the kind of cycles of life and what we can learn from nature's natural cycles, because I know when we were discussing this episode we were going to touch on kind of our the cycles of the moon and our menstrual cycles as well. So how does understanding the wild cycles of nature support us in creating magical lives, I guess, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense, Nicole. And I think again, it's one of those where we can have all these apps on our phone. Like I've got an app on my phone to tell me, when the full moon is happening and the different moon phases. But the
Mm.
best way to do it is to be outside. And depending on where you live will depend on how much you can see up in the sky at night. But most of us can see the moon to some degree. And it's about getting in tune with what is happening out in nature, getting in tune with what season we're in, getting in tune with what cycle we are close to. And as far as women, we are cyclical by nature. We have this cycle that intuitively happens and is in tune with the moon. In the wild, we would naturally bleed at dark moon, and we would ovulate at full moon. Some things you read, they talk about the wild witches, and they would sometimes bleed with a full moon the other way around. But generally in the wild, particularly when you live in quite tribal, all the women would bleed together, and they would bleed with the dark moon and ovulate with the full moon. And that ties in with seasons as well. Summer is classed as the ovulation time, when you've got all that energy and you're starting on the projects, and then winter time is connected with the bleeding time. So a lovely thing to do is just have a moment at each season to reflect on that. So I work a lot with the Chinese 5 elements, and the Chinese 5 elements are associated with the different seasons. So when you go into spring, so it's spring equinox, which is the time of the year where we go into spring, we go into the wood energy. So you might think of that as the energy of the tree. And then at summer solstice, we go around towards the end of June, we go into the fire energy. And then we now come up to Lammas time, which is mid-August time. Beginning of August, mid-August time. That's when we go into late summer, which is earth energy. And then autumn equinox, we go into metal energy. And then winter solstice, we go into water energy. So I always say, and when I'm working with people, I always say it's good to have a seasonal kind of review. So when you're coming up to spring, think about, oh, what flavors am I craving? How is my energy? How do I feel? I want to connect with spring. Do I want to collect some objects from outside and put them on a mantelpiece, if you have a mantelpiece, or make a little altar in the corner to actually bring spring into my environment? So as we were talking about earlier, the external environment is going towards spring. So how can I bring spring deeper into my internal environment? That might be through the foods you eat. It might be through the things you think about. So that spring energy, you might be thinking about having a bit of a spring clean. You might be thinking about connecting with things that you've been planting and trying to seed over the winter. And that could be physical things or mental things. But I would just invite everyone to do that throughout the year. Have that seasonal review to see how you're feeling. And particularly as women, we used to flow in, and we are, as I said, cyclical beings. We flow with our cycle, and that means the seasons affect us even more so. And it's just becoming aware. So you might start by monitoring your menstruation cycle with the moon cycle. And do you notice any difference if you bleed in closer to the dark moon, closer to the full moon? Do you notice any difference with your ovulation, depending on what time of the month it's going with, and how that connects with the moon? You know, some police stations still mark the full moon down. And when I used to be a teacher in secondary schools, you'd notice a difference with the children when it was full moon. So that's where the word, you know, lunatic comes from. It comes from lunar. And
I know. I only just realized this the other day. I was like, wow, how did I not even know that? Yeah.
and we are water beings, you know, just like Mother Earth herself. We are around 70% water. And we know if we go to the beach how much power the moon has over the waves. It's the moon that powers the waves. So if the moon is having that much power to create those amazing waves that crash ashore and make us relax just from that sound, think of the power that the moon is having on all the water that's inside of us.
Wow. Yeah. It kind of blows your mind, really, doesn't it? And I think what I'm curious about, I guess, is if the cycle, if the kind of season of your cycle is different to the season that we're living in, how does that, if that makes sense again, how do you kind of deal with that?
I think first of all, it's just acceptance. There's nothing going wrong. I mean, if you're not flowing as so-called nature intended, there's nothing going wrong. It may just be that you need to connect more with nature. It may just be that you're slightly out of alignment with your external environment, so to say. So
Mm,
a great thing to do is just make time to connect. Moon bathing is a great thing. So if you are able to go outside when the moon is shining, go outside and moonbathe, because the way our body knows what time of the month it is as far as the moon cycle is concerned is by exposing ourselves to the moon. So if we're not
yeah.
outside, then how is our body going to know that? It may be, you know, you're opening the curtains so the moon can shine through, and you might not sleep as well, but your body will be getting the amazing rays from the moon. You know, I'm blessed here, I live quite wild, so every time I want to go outside and I need to go outside to the toilet, I literally have to go outside. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what the weather is like in the winter. I love going outside in the winter to go to the toilet because the stars always look amazing because they shine in so much brighter in the cold, but you're just so aware of the moon. So I would say just every night make time to just step outside your door and look up at the sky.
That makes total sense. And we kind of, as a society, I guess, kind of accept that we would go outside to get in the rhythm of the sun. But we don't think about the moon, I guess, and kind of how we can, yeah, I guess, get more in flow with our natural cycles by. I love that. Yeah, I love that. And I do actually go for a walk at new moon and full moon. But I guess it's, yeah, the moon's always there. So why do we just do it then even?
I used to be part of a full moon women's ceremony
Mm,
that we
yeah.
used to run every full moon, where all the women would come together and we'd have a full moon ceremony. And it was passed down through from grandmother Twyla from the Seneca tribe into our community. And each woman commits to holding it in that space for 13 moons. And I was one of the women that committed for 13 moons. And it just changed everything by knowing every full moon that would be happening. And it doesn't have to be a big ceremony. You might just choose to, on each full moon, make time to consciously go outside, look at the moon,
Mm,
take 3 deep breaths. It doesn't have to be a massive thing. And that could be our ceremony, but it's about doing it, as we talked about earlier, doing it with intention. So
yeah.
you're intending on going outside on the full moon. Your intention is to connect with that full moon energy, to get your body connecting and back in the flow with the wild.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess it's just being intentional. It's like I've just created a new moon manifesting with the moon circle for secret witches actually to come and yeah, learn about manifesting and harnessing the power of new moon. So I love all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, very much. And I love that you described it as being important to be intentional. Gorgeous. So let me just see where to go next. Because I think my next question was, how can we be more intentional? But we've already talked about that. So I guess you touched a little bit there on the power of ritual. Um, and is there anything that you can, like, if you've got a favorite ritual, I guess, that you could recommend to people? And I guess it is about people making it their own, but I know yeah, you've probably got all sorts of amazing rituals.
I think there's rituals for all kinds of things, but I really love what you just said there, Nicole. It's about making it your own. I think very much so in our society, we're craving ritual, we're craving ceremony, and we tend to think that it has to be done the way of a certain tribe has done it, or it has to be done in a certain way, otherwise we're doing it wrong. But you can't go wrong if you're connecting with intuition. You can't go wrong if you're connecting with nature. And it's about going outside and feeling, giving yourself that time really to feel into what feels right for you. And for me, my favorite ritual is just something really simple. If I've been out working, or even if I'm at home working, it's making that time every day of just taking my shoes and socks off. And I walk down into our front field, and in our front field we've got this amazing standing stone that we erected when we came here. It was a stone that was lying in the stream, and it looked like a person lying, and it represented to me the land being asleep, and I wanted to wake up the land, wake up the medicine of the land. So we erected this stone right into the middle of our front field, because the energy of the stone radiates into all the medicine and the plants that we grow in and our food. Walking barefoot down to that standing stone and just having a few breaths by the standing stone and being barefoot in the earth and being on the earth long enough for me to feel the warmth of the earth come through my toes. That's my favorite ritual, because it makes me stop, because when you're walking barefoot you can't just stomp around, because you have to be more mindful about what you're walking on. And in the winter you have to be mindful, because you need to walk at a certain pace, otherwise your feet get a bit too cold. But I would say that is one of my favorite rituals.
That's gorgeous, and it's so simple, isn't it? It's just just reconnecting with
Yeah.
intention, and like you say, you can't get it wrong. So it's good to play with.
And I think that's the key message, really. I think as we are connecting more with the wild, as we are connecting more maybe with the plants, and wanting to maybe make a herbal tea, or we want to make a salve or an oil, there are guidelines for all of this. But I always like to say that, we're all able to do this. It's inside of us anyway. That ancestral memory is inside all of us, but we're very easily, we can go to, I'm not good enough to do this, I don't know enough. But we all know enough already, because it's already there, it's inside of us. We just need to get quiet enough to be able to listen to that ancestral memory that's deep inside there.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. And do it with awareness, I guess.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Now, obviously, we couldn't talk about the wild without talking about food, because that's how we even connected in the first place. And I know you've helped me absolutely transform my relationship with food by kind of reclaiming my own plant-based diet from the wild. And I know that's something often that my own clients will also struggle with. And on my own personal journey, I've had kind of eating disorders and things like that, and I know that is quite common of the secret witch. So I just wondered if we could touch a little bit on how important a kind of a plant-based life can be in terms of our rewilding, and also what you would say to somebody who feels that that's a real struggle, really difficult to incorporate into their lives.
Yeah, I think I would say to meet your body where your body's at, and don't set your goal too high, and just make simple changes that you can do, and you can celebrate every step of the way. I would say the reason I really connect with a wild plant-based lifestyle is because I can literally eat the plants that I have planted the seed in the ground, nourished, and watch them grow and then absorb into my body. And that is such a beautiful journey to go through. I would invite everybody to do that. Even if you haven't got a garden, you can do sprouted seeds with simply a jar in your house, or you can have a little plant box. I remember when I didn't have a garden, I just had little window boxes, and I grow bits of lettuce and even little onions and things like that. There's always something that you can grow, and having that connection changes your connection to food. You can have a connection at a DNA level. You can put the seed in your mouth so it connects with the DNA in your saliva before you can put it in the earth. And you can add
Wow, there you go. See, you blow my mind again.
you can ask that plant to grow medicine specific for you, because you've connected genetically before it's even gone into the earth.
I literally mind blown by that. That's like, now I'm on it.
It might be a bit difficult if you sprout in a pile of alfalfa seeds to get them all in your mouth to start with, but again, there's something that you you could do, you could just have your hands around the jar and even just speak to the little alfalfa seeds to ask them to create medicine that's good for you. But the idea of eating a plant-based diet is that you're eating food directly from the earth energy. And I always say it's great to eat above the ground in the summer and below the ground in the winter. So I think that's just a lovely saying to simplify what plant-based foods to eat. Yes, there's things that don't fit into that, such as kale, and I think we should eat kale all year because it's amazing anyway. But generally in the summer, we want to eat things above the earth, such as you've got your salads, you've got your beans, all those amazing salad things like cucumbers, tomatoes, they all grow above the earth. But then as we go into the winter, like the tree having the roots in the earth and the tree sap going down, the same thing happens with the food. So then we want to go to all the roots. It may be that you want to go to potatoes, you want to go to Swedes, you want to go to celeriacs and beetroot, because all that earth energy is going to be deep in the roots. So if you can eat that, again, you connect in with the energy of the earth. And I just find having the plant-based diet is a great way to enable you to cut out any middle animal that would normally be eating the plant-based foods, and then you'd be eating the animal. You kind of cutting out that middle animal, and you were going direct to the source of Mother Earth and eating the food straight from her. And again, keeping it simple and going back to that word intuition. Inside of us, we all know deep down what food is good and what food isn't so good. And I mean, those words are quite strong really, but what food resonates with our body and what food doesn't resonate with our body. And going back to that theory of we are animals and we are wild beings, it's about, we want to eat food that's as close to nature as possible. And I always say a great place to start is to simply make your meal and look down at it and ask yourself the question, is this going to make me the best possible version of me? Because as you're sleeping, everything you've eaten throughout the day is almost being knitted together inside of you to make new cells for you, to help repair and renew the cells inside of you. So you're going to be as good as what you eat. You are what you eat. I would say you are what you eat and what you excrete, both of them together, but you are what you eat. So if we put in amazing foods that are very natural throughout the day, then we are going to be making amazing natural cells that allow you to shine your light into the world. Looking at your meal and thinking, is this going to make the best possible version of me? And if not, start really simple. Grab a handful of salad and put it there. Doesn't matter what the rest of the meal is. If you were grabbing a handful of salad, you're instantly going to be boosting that meal. So start where you're at.
I think the way that you explain that is so transformational, and it's almost like before I came to you, I was drawn, like you say, by intuition to a more plant-based way of being, but I just didn't think that I could do it. And the way that you explain it kind of just makes it inevitable and really obviously simple. It's like, well, oh yeah, well, why wouldn't I just eat what makes me feel nourished? Like, it's yeah, so I love the way that you describe that. And there's also something funny that's happening recently, because I am terrible at cooking. But actually, it's really funny because I've been drawn to, and I think you mentioned the word nurturing earlier, and kind of almost there's that kind of feminine, like mothery kind of archetype arising in me with food that's like, I want to be able to cook. So I think my next step is to actually learn to cook some of these vegan things for myself, because I'm very fortunate that my partner is very good at cooking and yeah, likes to provide what I need. So but yeah, it's really interesting how even that has shifted, you know, the desire to cook and kind of have that nurturing way of being with food. So just thought that was quite interesting.
Food is so nurturing and so creative as well. When I was working full time as a teacher. I would come home and sometimes I didn't have children, so I'd come home and the house is empty, and I would just while I was waiting for my partner to come home, I would just spend the time meditating, but doing a cooking meditation. And it was so creative. You know, you have the creative license in your own kitchen to create whatever you want. And again, I would just invite people to connect with the plants by growing something. As I said, it can be something small as sprouts in a jar, because when you've nourished something from the seed to the plant, so you're going to eat, you're going to almost want to create a celebratory party for that.
I love that. Yeah, so much. That's amazing. And I think one of the things actually that stops me or has stopped me in the past from doing that is fear, because I grew up not really knowing how to cook. If the fire alarm went off, it was because dinner was ready, kind of thing. So yeah, it's really interesting to see that I'm being kind of nudged in that direction as well.
I look forward to see what you create, Nicole.
I know, me too. um and yeah, I guess we could touch on as well the importance of the body in general, because I think the body is something that secret witches, as I mentioned, have often a difficult relationship with. So what is the importance of our body, I guess?
I mean, the body is us essentially, but I always like to say that, like I mentioned earlier, we are the same as Mother Earth. The Earth is around 70% water and we are around 70% water. And like the Earth has all us beings on it, that's exactly what our body is. We are 75 to 100 trillion cells, depending on what book you read. I don't know who's counted them, but that's the general number they say. But we've got 75 trillion cells inside of us that are waiting for us to take care of them. And how our cells feel is how we feel. So going back to that nurturing and that mothering energy, that's what we want to do for our body, because in essence, we are our body. But if you zoom in, our body is just a collection of systems, and our systems are a collection of organs, and our organs are a collection of tissues, and our tissues are a collection of cells. So our job really is to look after our internal population, which are these 75 trillion cells. And in turn, if we look after them, they look after us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, gosh, that sounds like a very hefty responsibility now. There's a lot of them in there.
But the exciting thing is that every one of those cells, you've got 75 trillion cells. They are cheerleaders. They want you to thrive. They want you to be the best possible version of you. And every single moment of every single day, even now while we are talking, they are working 100% to try and make our body the best possible version of us, so we can thrive in the world, so we can do what we want to do. And there's all these intelligent programs that kick in place, even when we're not giving our body exactly what we need, like something as simple as water. There's all these intelligent programs that kick in place, such as dehydration alert, that allow our body to keep going even when we're not giving our body what we need. So I think every day we need to just take a moment and send gratitude to every single cell in our body, because it doesn't matter what we throw in at our body tries their best.
I love that. And I remember actually one of the other things that you blew my mind with is when I had kind of developed an imbalance in my feminine area, shall we say. And I've made that sound worse than it is actually. But said, Nicole, you developed an imbalance in the feminine line for a reason. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Because I'd actually just signed up to do a course called Waking Wild Feminine, all about kind of, yeah, the kind of, I guess, liberating and awakening myself to the feminine. So that was quite funny because, yeah, your body just kind of tells you that, yeah, that's what it needs. So it's really about deep listening to the intelligence of our bodies as well, I think. Yeah, gorgeous.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you said there, Nicole. It's about listening. And I think the main thing is, going back to connecting with the wild. When you connect with the wild, it makes you slow down. And you can't help but listen. If you're outside in the woodlands, you can't help to listen to the amazing sound of the wind in the trees and the birds in the trees. And it is just making time to listen to your body every day, because we all have crazy lives. You might have got a load of children at home that need you to mother them. You might have got a full-time job. You might need to try and get dinner for everybody. And it can be crazy, crazy times. But within the day, even if you can just find 30 seconds to just breathe with intention and listen and just see what comes through.
Yeah, gorgeous. Even better when it's in the wild.
Yes.
mm. So, where else do we want to go with this? Let me just feel into any other questions. I guess just going back to the kind of emotional eating, because often there can be a lot of shame that comes up with secret witches about that as well. And I wondered if there was anything that you could speak to on that and how to let go of emotional eating.
Yeah, emotional eating is massive for every single one of us. And some of it comes from childhood, how we associate being good with having a treat. And just that word treat has massive effectiveness. It's like I've had a bad day, I need to treat myself. And generally that word treat is associated with food. So I one of the things I always say when working with people, and I use it myself as well, is if you've had, particularly if you've had a day which has been more challenging, shall we say, then when you feel yourself going to reach for maybe that chocolate biscuit, or you're going to reach to eat a lot of certain food, you kind of binge eat, then if you can just start by having the awareness, that's the first step, just having awareness of what you're doing. And then once you've had the awareness, can you get to the next step? And the next step is asking yourself, do I need this, or do my emotions need this? Because a lot of the time when we say snacking throughout the day, or we are going for certain foods, particularly foods that might not serve every cell in our body as good as it could serve us, it's because we are trying to give our emotions a treat. And why are we trying to do that? Is because emotions arise in our body, and it's challenging, it's painful. I always say, on any healing journey you're at, there's no right or wrong healing journey. It's the journey you choose to take. But it's not as glamorous as we all see on Instagram. It's messy and it's painful. There's blood, sweat and tears involved. But as those emotions are arising, we want to get rid of them because they're painful. So what all of us do is we then push it down with food. So we suppress in that, and then our body has to think, okay, well, I can't get that emotion out, I can't get that bad day out, because she's not letting me do it, she's pushing it back down with food. So I then need to wrap up that emotion and store it somewhere for later, and that gets stored as toxicity in the body that then builds up over time and creates symptoms. So what I invite people to do is look at how else we can also treat the body. What else can we do? Maybe make a list of what you could do to treat the body. How else can you also express the emotions? Because if we are grabbing for those snacks or those treats, or we grab into binge eat, it's because the emotion is arising. So how can we safely let that emotion arise? I mean, the first step is, what is that emotion? If that emotion is maybe anger from the day, anger you haven't been able to express yourself, anger maybe you haven't been able to be yourself, anger you haven't to be in a position that you don't want to be in, and that is a lot of stuff arising and coming up in the body. Then I would invite you to, how can you express anger in a way that's safe? And by that I mean, there's no such thing as a negative emotion. The only negativity is how we choose to express it. So if we'd offload it onto someone else, that can be a negative way. So could we kind of go into the bedroom and scream into a pillow, or bang the pillow, get the anger out, jump up and down? Could we write it out? Could we do some conscious writing and write it out on the page?
Or go into the wild and scream it out as well.
Have the woods, go out and ask the trees to help you take that anger away, and also send the anger down into the earth, and use that spiritual composting. Ask the earth to compost the anger away for you.
Yeah, I love that. That sounds good. And it's really interesting you said about the word treat, actually, because I think it was my mum the other day when I was going to visit her. She said, "Oh, what can I get you for a treat?" And I spent so long eating without having treats as such that I was like, what does she mean? Temporarily. Whereas before I would have just been like, oh yeah, chocolate. That would be but I had to think for a moment of like, what does she mean, a treat? Because I just didn't see food that way anymore, which is really interesting. But I suspect also that secret witches potentially haven't felt safe to express their emotions, and I suppose if we're then not eating to suppress it, often a lot of emotion could come up, so that can be quite scary. But actually what you're saying is, and what I believe is, that everything is welcome, all is welcome. So it's very important to be able to just safely, like you say, safely express, and I guess the wild is a really great place for that. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, everything's welcome. Let the tears arise and water the earth, water the plants with your tears.
I love that so much. Yeah. And I guess how are some of the ways that trees have spoken to you? Because I think you said about talking to a tree. Do they talk back? It's like
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, some people would, think of that as kind of woo-woo talk, so to say. But I think all beings communicate. It's just having time to listen, and it's not. I wouldn't say it's a conversation as in as in verbal, like me and you were having this conversation here, but quite often if you take time and sit by trees, or if you take time and sit by plants, they will communicate on a level that you'll understand. It may be suddenly you have a vision in your head. It may be suddenly you think of something. So for instance, recently, because we've had so much sunshine, I've been making some flower essences. And flower essences are about not so much connecting with the medicinal quality of the plant for physical ailments. They are more about connecting with the, I would say, spiritual and emotional qualities of the plants. And some people say, well, how do you know what it's going to help with? And I would say, well, just go and sit by the plant, and ask, what can you help me with? And have a conversation. If you think about how herbalism came about and how all kind of connection with plants came about, as humans would go and we'd sit with the plants, and maybe we'd look at the plants, and sometimes you'd get clues from what the plant would look like. But a lot of it came from, you might call it telepathic communication with the plants, but it was just about having that time to sit with the plants and know and be willing to listen, be willing to trust. And that's the hardest thing. You know, sometimes you think, oh, it's my mind playing tricks on me. But then if you've got a couple of friends that are trying to connect with the same plant at the same time, and you're all having the same feeling, that's when you know it can't be you all going crazy. It has to be something in that. And when you look at the history of herbal medicine, that is how a lot of it arose. And you know, I think that was how people started to kind of fear the witch burning came about, because people were fearful of the connection that people had with the plants. People were fearful of the power that people had with the plants, and the power that they could then heal someone. But I think it's all about reigniting that within us, that we are part of nature, we are wild beings, so we need to connect with the other wild beings around us and just make time for it.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. And that's definitely my experience as well. Having trained as a homeopath, that's, you know, they do a lot of the provings with homeopathy in similar ways to what you were just describing, kind of connecting with the essence, I guess. So I love that. And yeah, I feel like this episode is then giving people permission to go out and yeah, do the witchy things like communicating with nature and plants, and seeing what they can hear back from that, I guess. You said when we were talking as well, there's a quote I liked actually, so I'm just going to read it. You said, women were the gatherers. They knew where to find the medicinal herbs to take care of their tribes, and where to find food at different times of the year. This memory is still inside of us, and the energy pull we sometimes experience from a plant when we're out in nature is our secret witch inviting us to connect with the plants. So yeah, I don't know if that ties in actually to what we were just talking about, or if there's anything you want to add to that, but I just loved that particular, when you wrote that out, I was like, oh, I love that.
I would say, you know, if you remember back to when you were a little girl, or a little boy, depending on who's listening, but if you remember back to that time, you can probably remember talking to plants outside. You can probably remember talking to trees. You might have even stuffed some rose petals in a jar and filled it up with water and had it on your shelf, and it might have gone a bit kind of musty by the end, but you would have remembered that. And that almost gets taken away from us because we feel that that's not the right way to be. It's not what people expect from us, but that is inside of us. But if we can connect back with that childlike quality, really, with that innocence and not judging of ourselves, and just go outside and think about what is around me and how can I connect with what is around me. Have a look, go outside with, you can get great apps on your phone, plant ID apps, or you can take a book, but it's so much easier these days because we all have our phones with us. And you can simply just look, even just what's in your garden, what so-called weeds, what we call the weeds, are out there that have medicine for us. And just start your journey, choose one of them. And you might sit there and draw the plant that's in front of you, because that allows you to really connect. What does she look like? And then you might think about, okay, well, what qualities does she have? And then you might want to sit and have a little conversation with her and find out how you can connect more. But I would say that to trust your intuition, to trust what is around you, and just maybe connect back with that inner little girl inside of you, because she knows what to do.
I love that. So it's about inviting the wild back in, really. Yeah.
Exactly.
Giving ourselves permission to as well, I think, is one of the first steps. One of the questions, I always invite questions from my Secret Witch Circle group over on Facebook. One of the questions that came up was, when you connect to nature, is it a knowing rather than a learning?
That's a really interesting question, the difference between knowing and learning. I would say it's a bit of both, because I would say that through how we've been brought up. For instance, I had moved quite far away from nature, and initially you might go outside and you might think, I don't know what to do. So you might need some inspiration, you might need some ideas. You might have picked up some ideas from this podcast or from other podcasts or from people you follow online to get you started. So sometimes we need to learn ideas from other people before we can let our intuition kick in, before we can know what to do. And then once we feel a bit of confidence, then we can allow our intuition to kick in and realize that we know already. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And I love how you've spoken to that, actually. Yeah, that's gorgeous. Thank you. Okay, so last question then, I guess, because I saw your YouTube video the other day about making a self-healing flower essence, and actually I shared it in my Facebook group because I loved it. And I just wondered, yeah, were there any kind of final practices or rituals that you wanted to share before we complete this podcast?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many rituals you can share. It's hard to think about one specific one, but I would say a lovely one to implement into most people's lives, whether you've got access to the wild or not, is a great way to connect with the wild is through the plants. And I would choose a plant that you can consume in a tea. So by that, it might be nettle tea, lemon balm tea, it could be catnip tea, it could be mugwort tea. There's loads of teas out there. But I would choose one, not a mixture, because there's so many delightful mixtures and delicious herbal mixtures that you can get. I would choose one, and I would make time, even if it's not every day, even if it's just once a week, but make time to ritually drink that drink, but drink her with intention. So think about, before you make the cup of tea, what is your intention? Is your intention to connect with that plant, and through the connection with the plant, to connect with the soil that plant has grown in? Is your intention to get some healing from the plant, and what would you like to get from that plant? But I would invite you to connect with that plant on a regular basis. And the tea is a great way to do it, because you don't so much need access with the wild, but you can still connect with the wild through the plant. So it doesn't matter whether you're living in a bed sit or whether you are living out in nature, you can all connect by having a simple cup of herbal tea, but connecting with the same herb consistently. It's a bit like if you were starting a new friendship, you would gradually connect that friendship, and you would connect more and maybe spend a bit more time with each other. And it's exactly the same with the plants. You would start with a little cup of tea, but then that connection will become more regular. Before you know it, she becomes your best friend.
Love that. So all about deepening intimacy with the wild. I love that. Gorgeous. What a way to end as well. Yeah, perfect. I'm just thinking I've got some herbs that I've been growing, and yeah, I do often have a chamomile tea. So yeah, maybe I'll do that instead of the cacao now. Who knows? So many options. And just if anybody wants to kind of follow you or find out more about your work or what you've been up to, I just wondered if you wanted to finish by sharing, yeah, what you've got going on and where people can find you.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the opportunity, Nicole. So my website is selenawalker.earth, and you can find everything about me there. I'm on most of the social media, so I tend to hang out more on Instagram and Facebook. So on Instagram, I'm Selena_Walker. And on Facebook, I'm selenawalker.earth. And also on Facebook, I've got a free Facebook group that you can join. It's all about creating a healthy body, a healthy mind, and a healthy planet. And in the future, so probably by the time this has come out, actually, I'm going to have an online course teaching people how to introduce raw cacao into their life and how to make chocolate, because
Oh.
first plants that I connected with, and it's a plant that we all connect with, and I want to teach people how they can make chocolate that heals them and that sings to them. And I'm also going to be starting an online tribe, so if any of you want to find out about that in the future, about how we can all connect in the wild together, then head on over to my website and sign up to my newsletter, and you'll be in touch and we can connect like that. And I look forward to connecting you all in the future.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm going to be, yeah, keeping my eyes open for the cooking chocolate. Maybe that's a good place for me to start.
Definitely.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Selena. I really enjoyed that. And I know there's, yeah, again, you've blown my mind in a few places there. So I feel like it'll be a really good episode for the Secret Witch to listen to.
Oh, I've enjoyed every single moment together. It's been so great. And I love listening to your podcast. So it's been an absolute delight to actually be part of it.
Oh, yeah, no, it's amazing to have you. And yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for sharing this amazing work with all the secret witches out there.
Gosh, well, this was one of my favourite conversations. I love this brilliant conversation with Selena about the power of connecting with the wild. There were so many gems in this conversation, but here are my key takeaways. We can so often think that we are on track to having our dream life when we're living unconsciously in a spiritless society, but it may not be fulfilling and can leave us feeling we are lacking, and our bodies often take the physical hit on that. The best way to navigate that is to begin to listen in deeper to our wisdom and the wisdom of the natural world. We are the wild. In fact, we are wild animals, so we need to be exposed to the wild in order to thrive and balance our inner and outer worlds. We need to give ourselves permission to invite the wild in and then get intimate with it. There's no right or wrong way of doing this, so let yourself be guided by intuition. Every interaction with the world should be intentional to harness the real magic of it. So we simply need to set an intention for our interaction with the wild and how it can support us in reclaiming our power and creating a magical life. Our bodies are made up of trillions of cells, and the wild can help us look after them. If we eat food from the wild that supports ourselves, it becomes inevitable to eat a more plant-based diet because we're only putting things in our body that it longs for and which nourishes it. However, we have to meet our body where it's at, and we can do this by starting small. Our bodies and the wild all operate on natural cycles and rhythms. Nature and the female body are both cyclical. For example, the moon has a cycle. Again, there's no right or wrong, but to connect back into a rhythm with nature, bathe in the full moon to remind your body what it should be doing. If you'd like to get the show notes and links for everything we've chatted about in this episode, head to www.secretwitch.co.uk. If you know a secret witch who would love this episode, please share with them to help them liberate themselves. And so you don't miss out on next week's episode, head to your podcast app of choice and hit subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.